right. Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome to Minds Behind the Music. I am your host, LA. Here with me is my friend and fellow bandmate, Mason.
Hello. Good to be back.
Yep, good to have you back as well. Now,
Uh,
today's video is quite a special one. It was one that I found from that Mason showed me, and it was Frank Zappa talking about things that really relate to today or relate to a lot of current events. And keep in mind, this is a Frank Zappa interview from 1971, and I believe this video was uploaded like right as 2020 was ending, so it was kind of predicting 2020 rather than 2021. But there are a lot of things in 2021 that are very similar, that are happening similar to what Zappa is talking about, and this was actually 50 years ago, 1971 and 2021. Before we get into it, do you have anything you want to say about it, Mason?
uh, so I just think it's very I think that the title is misleading. I think that it's not so much about predicting 2020, so to speak, as much as to show that probably not a whole lot has changed since 1971. So I think that's probably a good like prerequisite to keep in mind, like wear that lens while you're watching that video, because I think it's way more telling if you look at it that way.
Yeah. It says Nick Riccardi says POV, you're Frank and I'm Zappa. That might be the dynamic today. But let's get into it, shall we?
It's time for a revolution, but probably not in the terms that people imagine it.
Let's put it full screen.
The word seems to conjure up images of sort of a modern day version of peasants going into the street with their pitchforks to go after the bad guy who lives in a big house someplace in a hill, and we're going to get that son of a bitch, and we'll take all the stuff away from him and we'll give it to the workers, you know? And that's not the kind of revolution I had in mind.
Which one had you in mind?
Right off the bat, there's already things that I could think of that relate to what he's talking about.
I think 100%.
It's not even like a physical revolution. Like, people aren't going out and attacking, like, big corporation people, like big rich CEOs and all this other stuff. Like, it's like, you remember the stuff going on with Wall Street with GameStop
Good
and
Lord.
Robinhood. That's basically an electronic version of what Frank Zappa was talking about.
Right. Oh God, or Dogecoin. That is the
Dogecoin.
meme of the century.
It's the Uno reverse card to Wall Street.
To the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh geez. All right.
Well, I thought that it might be nice if
What were you gonna say?
Oh, nothing. I'd rather keep watching for a couple seconds because I got some good stuff when the video's ending.
All right.
was handled in a little bit more modern, efficient way, without people getting slaughtered in the street. It's a matter of infiltration.
What kind of infiltration?
Because the thing that's wrong today is that the people who are in control of the media and the government and things that run the lives of the average person in the street, they aren't doing a good job of it because they don't really care. And so if you just replace them, and I think that's a possibility.
By whom?
By interested people from the younger generation.
You think they are more interested in the older ones? You think it's a matter of age?
I think the potential is there in the younger generation. I don't think that right now they are really interested. Their political involvement is on a very superficial basis.
And I think it's like that today, especially with like the Gen Z. A lot with, at least with a lot of the Gen Z people, it's like very superficial, and I think like it could be very conflicting in regards to like how people are today. Like, it's, I don't know, some are Before I go any further, was there something you wanted to say about that or what I'm talking about, Mason?
So I'd have to. I think there's a pretty good link, um, in that the counterculture during the '60s had that same idea, that same revolutionist idea, like, oh, let's tear down the system. And I had, or I have, people that I know that are completely like that. Like, let's tear down the system. Let's um, let's make great stride for change. And there are some people that I know that actually try to, like, put their foot in the door of doing something like that, but it stops short at the social interactions. Like, people that I've known that will go to rallies and will be like, yeah, like we need to do something. Well, what is that something? And then they can't conjure up an answer. It's like, it almost feels like,
Stagnant.
yeah, like it's in a perpetual state of just, of, we got to do something, but we don't know what. Like,
Yeah. I think that is a lot. It has a lot to do with, I guess, with conflicting ideals. I noticed that a lot of Gen Z people, or a lot of people that grew up just like us, tend to they tend to be not as tolerable with contrasting ideas and different like different um morals and principles on how life should be run. And there I feel like of there needs to be more of a talking there needs to be a way of talking these issues out rather than saying, "Oh, he disagrees with me, so he has problems." You need to hear other people out and hear what they have to say, because there's always a reason behind why people think the way that they do.
right. Um, I would I would also have to go ahead and argue that, there's actually, I mean, you can see it. You don't need a study to prove it. But since this was 1971, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is 1971.
And from then till now, you see a direct um, decrease in the ability of bipartisanship between senators, right? And when you see your world leaders acting that way, um, I feel like it's kind of like, what came first, chicken or the egg? Um, was it the senators that led the people to be more radicalized, or is it the people that voted in uh, people who were less willing to be bipartisan? But it's like, seeing that, like, okay, 50 years ago, and Zappa's talking about this divide, this great divide that was happening in 1971, and now we're even less likely to be uh, open to new ideas and interpretations. But at the same time, I feel like you can't blame people either, because when there's somebody like a radical on the left sphere and a radical on the right sphere, how are they supposed to reach common ground? You know what I mean? I feel
Yeah.
like I almost can't blame people for not being able to see something from a different side. I think it's a great skill, but I almost can't blame people.
I think that a lot of people tend to think that I think that a lot of people tend to think that, oh, we should have someone that's on the far left debate with someone from the far right, and it might end up coming out good, which in reality it never does. It always ends up being perfect friction, and you need to find those people that will meet in the middle to understand both people's arguments and views and principles in order for there to truly be an understanding. And believe it or not, there are a lot of people out there that exist with those like common ground views or
Right.
the middle ground views.
Um, And I mean, hey, I'll be completely honest. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of it. I oh God, I almost don't want to get into specifics, but I'm guilty of the idea of radicalism on, for that matter, either side. But let's just go ahead and float the euphemism of the current political radicalism. I'm not so privy to that, and would be less understanding of that type of sphere, just by nature of the way that I've seen people act from that sphere. So I'm guilty of it. I am definitely guilty of it, and I think everybody is to an extent. But there's got to come a point where there has to be some sort of common ground and understanding, and without that, like, how are you supposed to get anywhere if you can't agree where you are, right?
Yeah. And I'm guilty of that as well. Like I've gotten too much into a certain view or idea on something where it's like, this is the way, this is right. No one else, anyone else that disagrees is just not as smart as me. And it's, you need to take a step back and think, maybe there's a reason why they have a different way of thinking, and they probably look, hey, maybe it's because this affects a certain person here, or this affects me in a specific type of way. And that's what a lot of people need to think about.
Right.
Like do you it could be like, do you or do you not want to be looked at as a commodity? Do you want to have more control over your life? Or it could just be any other thing, not even just morally or politically.
Right.
But
I find probably a good example of that is a recent storms in Texas, right? That eventually, well, now they're here. Unfortunately, you could look outside and see the snow. Good Lord.
yeah, I'm not feeling it. I'm done with I'm done with winter.
Right.
I've had
God,
enough
it was
winter
going
for
so
this
good.
year. Yeah,
Oh,
like
it was
the first few times it wasn't bad, but now we're just kind of like tired of it.
right. Yeah, winter was going okay, and I could see the grass and all the green, and I was like, all right, spring's gonna be here sooner than I thought, and then all this came, and it really ruined my winter, I gotta say.
6 more weeks of winter.
Oh God.
I'm not ready for that.
No. That being said, right, the snowstorms in Texas, and there was and there's like that age-old debate of regulation versus deregulation, right? And being able to control oneself versus not necessarily being controlled, but regulated, I suppose. And it's like, on one hand, there's a situation where government regulation could have stepped in and had potentially saved people's lives, but on the other hand, that meant regulation from the government, right? So it's like that age-old debate, like left, right, what's the correct answer, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I knew when I sent the link to him that this was going to become a meme fest.
I'm really hoping it does. So let's continue.
They're still they go out for the social aspects of a march or a rally rather than for the what it could possibly accomplish. And I don't think that demonstrations are the best possible tactic.
What do you think of the present situation here in the States? I mean, politically.
Well, it's a little frightening at times. I'm still optimistic about it because America is such a crazy place. I mean, it's when you consider that you can elect a person like Richard Nixon just by running the proper type of television advertising campaign. it's possible that a person with an equal amount of money for the same size campaign, he spent $22 million to convince a bunch of people to vote for him, that he was a good bet for the presidency. Anybody else with $22 million and the right kind of PR firm could do the same thing.
And what I notice is that America has one of the biggest changing political climates in the world. I'm not saying they're the only country to have that, but they're one of the most notable countries. Even back then, in like the 60s, 70s, even before even before the 90s with George H.W. Bush, like the late 80s, early 90s, even before they had with that, like if you bring up Richard Nixon, he's a notable influence. He was he played his cards right. Yeah. But he played his cards right and he knew how to get in office. And
Got caught.
Yeah. It didn't end well for him, to say the least, but he played his cards right to become president for the time being. After after Johnson stepped down. And it happens. Sometimes you're not gonna. Sometimes, like, and this is not to discourage anyone from voting for certain people or just any sort of political or anyone on the political spectrum, but like more often than not, like you'd be surprised how many politicians that whether or not you like or dislike will end up being president for one reason or the other. And a lot of it did have to do with with advertising, with television advertising, like what Frank Zappa mentioned, and all the money and effort you put into your campaign. That's usually the sign of the payoff.
I know this is digressing a little bit, but I love that. I'm not sure if it's George Carlin or somebody else came up with this, but I know for a fact that George Carlin has said this. It was basically like they killed Martin Luther King, they killed JFK, they killed Robert Kennedy, and they nailed Jesus to the cross. And it's like anybody. Oh yeah, and they shot Malcolm X. Anybody who is like any sort of bringer of the idea of peace, don't think the world is ready for it, because then you have the types who are really nasty individuals, who not saying that that said nasty individual should be killed, but definitely not saying that. But almost no punishment comes to people who don't have even a single air of or word of peace come out of their mouth. I find that very I find that very telling, both in the 60s counterculture and even now. I mean, even though I'd say they're different, I don't know. I think it's another idea that I think he's prying at from a revolution standpoint. I mean,
yeah. And
I
think it's
I
just
must
like
beg the question: is Greg coming on anytime soon?
Let me see. Probably not right now. I'll keep an eye out for him, and let me just see. No worries. Yeah, he might be on, but it'll probably be after the video. We'll probably when we do the final thoughts.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess it's like that. Like what Billy Joel says in his song, "Only the good die young." And a lot of other people say this too, "Only the good die young." And there's a reason why they say that. And I remember hearing that term, like people, and I'm not trying to say people who wanted world peace and wanted peace aren't memorable, but a lot of like the really evil, vile, morally unfit people, or as what some people would say, morally unfit, tend to be the most memorable and most like immortal, which
Right.
is sad to say, but in the current political climate, that tends to be a thing, because when when you think of bad people, you could name a lot of people off of the top. When you think of people that really believed in peace and like equality and harmony and all that other stuff, there's still a decent amount, but there's only a handful of like the currents and when it comes to current events.
Right.
Like again, there are people that wanted world peace that are immortalized, like Bob Marley, Martin Luther King, and a lot of other civil rights activists. You can even name Malcolm X. He encouraged a lot of free thinking and a lot of free thinking in the African American community, and there's a lot of other civil rights activists as well, like Rosa Parks, that recent man who died from cancer. I can't remember his name, which is I feel really terrible for that.
Oh, Rush Limbaugh.
No, the guy the civil rights activist that died from cancer.
Oh,
I don't think Rush Limbaugh was a
remember his
civil
name.
rights activist. I feel so bad for that. But he was an iconic figure that he had very similar ideas to Martin Luther King. He died around the same time, or I think it's shortly before Alex Trebek died, which may they both rest in peace, by the way. I think they were
Right.
around the same age. But he was as much an icon as Martin Luther King was, but that's more of like you really have to do the heavy research for that because they won't really there isn't a lot of that talked about in the history books nowadays, or at least it's starting to change.
Right. I I gotta interject really quick. It's John Lewis.
John Lewis.
Thank
I
you.
can't believe
Thank you if you're listening, buddy, Zach. Thanks for helping me out.
Yeah, thank you. You saved our bacon. But yeah, John Lewis, that's his name. But yeah, he was a notable icon in the civil rights movement as well. He passed away from cancer, I believe, sometime last year. And
I forget oh god, I forgot the basis for your argument, but oh yeah, right. The peace activist, right? Good Die Young. I find it in that same vein, I find it ironic, like how much in school possibly is focused on good characters throughout history, and how much time is focused learning about the destructionists and Stalin, Mao, Hitler. How much time solely is devoted to just those three alone about the death and destruction, right? And I get the history. It's important to know and learn from your faults. I'm very I get a little freaked out whenever God, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of censorship or cancel culture, but I think like you got to lay everything out, right? And learning from history is the most important thing that you could possibly do. That being said, like I said, I think there's something to be said for the fact that how much time is solely spent on just those three figures alone compared to how much good that does exist in the world, right?
yeah.
Honestly, I'd say that the amount of time that I ever spent learning, I don't think there is even one time in any of my history classes throughout high school that Robert Kennedy was ever brought up, ever. Not once.
Mm-hmm. I could only think of one time, and that was my junior year of high school.
And how long did you spend on him? Right, like a day?
Probably like a day or two.
Right.
From what I remember, probably like a day or two. And that was something I actually was meaning to bring up. It's like when you look back at your like social studies classes or like your history classes, they'll only bring up like the bad that happens in history. More often than not, you're going to remember a lot of the bad rather than a lot of the good that's happened in history. Like, for example, I know I'm probably going to go down the rabbit hole here. You learn about the Holocaust in not just in your history classes, but also in your like English classes, like your reading and writing classes, like all that other stuff. And you're going to learn about, the you're going to learn about um a lot of the historical a lot of the historical tragedies that bestowed onto the US as well, like the treatment of the Native Americans and just the civil rights movement as well. You're going to learn more about that in not just your social studies or history classes. You're going to learn that in other classes too, which I'm not to say that that it probably wasn't, not to say that it wasn't necessary to learn it in those other classes, but those are probably the most memorable that people would remember. Those are probably the most memorable things or memorable pieces of history that will stick with you. Like, for example, how are you? Most people don't remember that the 70s was probably one of the best decades for the American economy, and I don't know really anybody that will mention that. Was it perfect?
It
No.
wasn't the perfect decade for gas prices, I tell you that.
Well, yeah, because of the oil crisis and when it came to gas, but it was always looked at as the feel good year for many reasons.
I thought that was the 50s.
It was the
Well,
50s
I
as
mean,
well.
if you were
but
like white and middle class, it was the 50s.
yeah, if you were a white male in the middle class, that would have been like the 50s.
Right.
But um, but yeah, like no one really, you can't really like look at the positive. Like, there's not a lot of like positive moments in history that people remember uh besides the icons that fought for equal rights and fought for legitimate treating people with decency or human decency. Like, those are the only instances I could remember.
Right. That being said, I'm definitely not denouncing that shouldn't you shouldn't learn about atrocities.
Yeah, neither am I.
Like
but-
you I mean things like let's go. I think this is pretty pertinent. Let's go with the idea of fascism. The term has become so convoluted that people can't even like constitute like if I ask somebody to define fascism, it's probably going to be just something that they don't like, right?
Mhm. Or
It's
they're
it's
going to name
become
a certain political figure or a certain historical figure.
right. So when it comes time that actual fascism creeps into society, um, it's so whitewashed that you can't discern what is actually that. So then you're taken by the wayside. It's like a gradual progression. And I think that's a pretty
It's a
uh
scary thing to think about.
let's call it poetic in the fact that you study these ideals and and when something like that could possibly happen, you don't
Yo,
hello. Uh, uh, people may not often recognize it, which is another thing. I feel like that relates back to the whole political movement, especially the one going on right now, right? Um, I'd say that again, there's people that I know that would go to the rallies and fight for whatever, fight for justice, fight for minimum wage, whatever, right? But when like tasked to actually have discussion about the political climate and why they think something is the way that they can't tell you, right?
Mhm.
I think that's the major problem with any revolution is that the people who are fighting for the revolution don't know why they're doing what it is that they're doing. So
Yeah,
it's easy to characterize them as stupid and give power to the fascists, right?
yeah.
Like
And in their defense, I understand that it's difficult to get into extreme detail with certain causes and uh, certain political uh, means. but at the same time, you do have to know what you're fighting for.
Right.
Yo, Greg, what's up, man?
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
No worries, man.
Finishing up the
Ooh.
podcast on the other end.
Yeah, I
Awesome,
saw
we
that.
got a third
I
person.
thought it was a pretty good show.
Yeah, man, it was I was standing up for a friend, you know, like if you're not well aware of who what podcast we are on, Red Sings the Blues is the name of the podcast. It's in the chat. Go subscribe to it if you haven't already. We're at
Yeah,
1,000.
definitely.
We're actually at 1,000.
Yeah, definitely give them a give us a subscribe, because like you said, we're already at 1,000. Definitely check out our stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Greg is the host of that podcast.
Yeah, definitely, man. I try to not be late and stuff over on this podcast, but you know, like people be giving me emails and stuff like that on the Red Sings the Blues podcast. So, you know, I have to, you know, do my boss duties and, you know, just tend to that, because, you know, how I'm saying, you know, you gotta, once you become the boss of a podcast, you know, like people like what you do, people like what you say, you know, that's, you know, you have to tend to that, you know.
Yeah, I know how that can be.
Yeah. But what did I miss?
Just Frank Zappa just talking about stuff that really relates to today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna continue. Before that, do you have anything you want to say, Mason? You have anything more that you wanted to say?
No, I think I think I talked enough.
All right, we'll just continue.
Why don't you run for president?
I thought about it a number of times before, and then the thing that always holds me back is that what would it feel like to actually be the president, you know, and have to stay in Washington, D.C. in that house for 4 years? That'd be pretty grim.
I saw already some stickers. Frank Zappa for president.
I haven't seen any stickers. I've seen some little cards that somebody printed up. I didn't have anything to do with them. But it's true. I had thought about it. I've thought about politics a number of times, but you can't do it all just from the presidency. The president doesn't have the absolute control in the United States, because you have to, the power is divided up between him and the Senate and the Congress and the rest of that crap. And if you go in there and you can't work in conjunction with the people who are in the Senate and the Congress, you can't get anything done.
And
I like
honestly,
how he momentarily forgets 3 branches of government.
Yeah, I like that. I do agree with what you were saying about the video. I meant to mention that before, that it's not really like him predicting this current political climate. It's more so that things haven't really changed since 1971 in regards to like just how the whole political climate works, or how it has worked for the past 50 years. And that last line, like, yeah, he is right. Like, it's not just the president that controls what this country does, or like how to pass laws and all that. They always have to negotiate between the Senate and Congress, and it's always been a back and forth thing. Like, especially with the last two presidents we had, it's always been an ongoing debate, or ongoing like argument between the president with the Senate and Congress. And it might have even, and it's probably even been before that, like what Frank Zappa has mentioned. It's been like that for the past 50 years, maybe even longer than that. Do you guys have what do you guys think about just this, about what these last few things that Frank Zappa has said?
I'd like to hear what Greg has to say.
Well, when it comes down to government, you know, like people have said certain things, oh, you should be in politics. And then I think about me being in politics. I'm like, do I really want to be in politics? Because I'd probably end up just as corrupt as these dudes that are in office, man. You know, like everyone's got their thing about, you know, politics and whatnot. But like, even for me, I'm like, yo, I would not want to go into politics. I think I value my system enough, you know, to, you know, not be in politics.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, it is a lot to think about too. Like what Frank Zappa said, like it's like, I'm not gonna lie, I've thought about going into politics as well, but there's definitely like, I think it would get jarring, like being a president or a mayor, because you'd have to be in a certain area for the next however many years you have. If you're president, it'll be either 4 or 8, or if you're a mayor, you'll have to, you'll have to be figuring things out every day between, the other people that run the town or run the cities, and it's just jarring, and you're not always going to make promises that you can keep. And
Yeah,
that's what
that's
a
tough.
lot of, like, it's nice to have these ideals and be like, hey, I want to make a change for once, but you have to be realistic about it. Like, you're not always going to make ends meet with the change you want to be or you want to do.
Mhm.
Now, let's go on with the final thoughts of this. Um, what Mason? What makes you really say that things haven't changed between what Frank Zappa's talked about and what just what goes on today? Like, a lot of people said that this title was clickbait, but I don't know. I wouldn't call it clickbait.
Um, I guess I wouldn't call it clickbait, but I would call it I guess naive. Um, I mean, obviously he wasn't predicting 2020. He was relating what was happening in his time, and I mean, towards the end he was talking about running for president, and I think he flung some crap at Richard Nixon. I think that nothing has changed in that for the past 50 years. It's pretty much just been a big political stalemate, but with more radicalism, right? Like 50 years ago, we had Richard Nixon, who by 1970 standards was like bad guy, right? Now we have a different Republican president who could be likened to Richard Nixon, but it's more radicalized, right? So I think that nothing has changed and that the struggle is just entirely the same between one group of people and the other. And it's for the foreseeable future going to stay that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think I don't even think the political party even matters with, how people view the president. There's always going to be naysayers, and there's always going to be, people that are for this guy or for the next person. Like, it's just going to be that same political climate, and whatever happens, like, only time will tell.
I actually I was talking with Boogie the other day, and we were talking about I think when the impeachment trial was going on, or rather just the trial, and we were like, people were praising the Republican. People now are praising the Republican Party of the 70s for their stand up to Richard Nixon and ability to like how bipartisan that everybody was in 1974, right? And I think it's a scary thought that 30, 40, maybe 50 years from now, when something like Richard Nixon or an impeachment like Donald Trump happens again, people are going to be praising that political party 50 years from now, right, for saying, oh, well, look back to 2020 and see how bipartisan the parties were then. Like, I think it's just going to get more radicalized as time goes on. And that's,
Well, that's all.
again,
That's where we're already heading. We're heading down that polarization path, and while we're at, I'm going to say this right now, like since we're at people's necks right now over actually sort of nothing, other countries are kind of like taking notes. As I just recently saw a article where China is saying to its constituents, yeah, we should remasculinize our men. You know what that means, right? That they're taking all of their sweet old time. They're looking at us and saying, well, our people are divided. We're at arm's length with each other, right? We're divided. Our communities are shot, right? And when in other countries are just like, this is a good time to attack, because when the people are divided, no one's you know, everyone's at each other's necks and whatnot, we can just take over. You know what I'm saying?
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
That's
China's
been a
taking advantage of it.
that's been a tactic for many years, maybe even centuries. That divide and conquer tactic. Like it's been used for monarchs, or for monarchies, and it's been used for just democracies and republics and all that jazz. But that's been a common, believe it or not, it's been a common takeover tactic for many centuries. But do you guys have anything else you would like to say?
Oh, good, man.
All right.
Again, I think I've opened my mouth enough.
Yeah, this is.
I'll keep talking all day.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree what you were saying. Like, it's not that, again, it's not that Frank Zappa was predicting anything. Like, I know the title of this podcast might be misleading because I say Frank Zappa predicts 2021, because the original idea that I had was just him predicting the future, which it wasn't him predicting it. It's just him talking about, what's going on in his time. But, and I guess in a way he is kind of predicting it, because he's just saying, hey, this is never going to change, and it's probably going to it's going to become more and more radical as the years go by. So in a sense, he is predicting it, but at the same time, nothing has changed. So I think this is more of a scenario which the more that things change, the more they stay the same. And that's honestly how I want to end it. Guys, like, comment, share, and subscribe if you want to see videos similar to this one. Thank you again, Mason and Greg, for coming on to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
No problem.
It's always a pleasure to have you guys. For any updates regarding the podcast, it will just follow my Instagram at LA Perez Works. I usually put stuff on my story on Instagram, so if you want to see any updates regarding the podcast, just go on there. And just just a friendly reminder, drink your water, take care of yourselves, vocalists, and you should be good. Because
Right.
I don't want any of you singers to get up on stage and, sound like this. This tomorrow I'm gonna have another vocal lesson for you guys. So just get ready
Why
for
did you
that.
not tell me beforehand? That was horrible.
Is this how you're feeling, Mason?
Too bad that didn't kill me.
Yeah. Do you have all these clips saved?
Yeah.
All right.
I definitely plan to have some.
I give you
more.
props.
But guys, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I know it's snowing outside, so please be safe. Don't listen to this podcast while you're driving, because it's snowing and you should probably be at home. So just stay safe. Plow any snow that you have, like shovel the driveway. I'm unable to because I'm still letting my stitches heal from my surgery. But just keep in mind of that. And I hope you have a good one. As always, stay tuned.